Hi everyone, it's Katie and today I am sharing with you a long-awaited and long-promised video. This is my out-of-print tarot deck collection of 2016. I'll leave a link to part 1 of the collection, the in-print tarot decks, and I'll also leave links to the collection videos from 2015 just in case you're interested. Now these decks are all out of print as far as I'm aware. That may change, sometimes decks come in and out of print, but at this point in time these decks are out of print. I'll also leave a link below to the video that I made about how to find out of print decks. I mean, there's no foolproof way of getting a bargain, but I share with you in that video some of the tips and tricks that I've used to find all of these decks for really reasonable prices and trades. These are in no particular order, so without further ado, let's jump in. So this is the Servants of the Light Tarot, and I actually have 2 of this deck. That was by happy accident. This is by Dolores Ashcroft-Nowicki, but the major arcana were illustrated by Josephine Gill, who is the creator and illustrator of the Gill Tarot, which is my favourite deck ever. So I was always really drawn to getting my hands on this deck for that reason alone. It's the only other deck that she's ever participated in. It's just the major arcana that she has illustrated though. The minors are done by, I've forgotten his name, but someone else. It's a very interesting deck. It's very esoteric, and so the guidebook is handy. This is the Babylonian Tarot. This is one that I got given, and this is the back end. It's so pretty. The reason I wanted it is because a lot of the original story of Lilith kind of comes from Babylon, Sumerian sort of history, and she is featured in this deck. It's not a deck that I've worked with a lot yet. I'm not sure why that is. I think because I was attracted to this deck because of its association with Lilith. I do want to approach it with a lot of reverence, and if you've been following me this year, you may be aware that I haven't been able to read a lot this year, and so I do really want to get into the guidebook of this deck. This is the Whispering Tarot by Hazel. I love this deck, and it very nearly made it into my favorite tarot decks video of the year. This is the backing. Isn't that beautiful? It is kind of like a miniature deck. It's very small, but I love it. I think it's quite cute. The art's beautiful, I think. Almost cutesy, but not quite. I don't know. I love it. I love how a lot of the elements are kind of almost brought to life. Hazel does have a book called Tarot Decoded, I think it is. I don't own that book, but I do intend on purchasing it when I've kind of gotten into this deck a little bit more. I really do love this deck, and I've really enjoyed the readings that I have done with it. It's just still not new to me because I have worked with it and I've had it for a few months, but I guess I'm not as well acquainted with it as I would like to be. Isn't this cool? I love it. I love the rainbows and it's just so alive, this deck. It's just beautiful, and I love the colours. So close to being in my favourites this year, just not quite there. Perhaps it'll make it next year. This is another deck I have 2 copies of. I promise this isn't a regular thing, it's just these 2 decks. This is the Ravenswood Eastern Tarot. Now this copy I don't have the box or the little white book for, but the other copy is sealed. So they're basically like in opposite condition. I really like this deck though. It's just this little black and white deck, and it's not quite a pocket size, but it is smaller. And it's super clear as a reader. I love it. It's such a fun little deck to use. And I use it fairly regularly, just because it's so traditional, but it feels different enough to be interesting. And I really do like the fact that it's black and white. I think on the box it says, is it this one? Tarot deck in black and white, suitable for personal colouring. So I think you're supposed to colour it in, but I actually really like the fact that it's black and white. Although I suppose seeing as I have two, if I decide not to trade or sell the second copy, that could be an option for me. I just don't see myself doing it because I like the black and whiteness of it. I think that's what I like most about it. It's really lovely though. Look at the star. Love it. This is the Jolanda Tarot, and I have the purple bordered edition. There is a blue border, which I think is the older, fancier, more expensive one. This one is in order. I don't want to sound rude to the person who gave it to me because I'm very grateful for our trade. It's just that it smells a little bit like smoke. Perhaps there was a smoker in the house. And that happens, but I've just had a little bit more trouble getting the smell out than I have with other decks. But I'm going to continue trying a few different options of getting that smell out because I just love the artwork. I just think it's so fantastic and fairy tale, but still really kind of raw in a lot of ways. I love the colours, although I'm not big on the borders. I have seen this deck trimmed though, so that may be an option in the future. I'm just not quite sure whether I'd like to do that to this deck yet. I love the Hangman. This is another one of my favourite go-to decks. This is the Hudes Tarot. Did I put this in my favourite tarot decks of 2016 video? I think I did, but if I didn't, it came very, very close. I love this deck. I understand why it's not super popular because I just don't think it's as exciting or as enthralling, the imagery, as some other decks. But it is beautiful, and it is a reliable, calm, helpful reader. I definitely get a lot of use out of this deck. It's just a wonderful all-rounder, and it's so good in those high pressure situations because it just keeps a cool head. Just love it. I love the colours. Just reminds me of autumn. It's so fun, and it's kind of got a lot of like wallpaper and classic map. They kind of used, see his shirt is like 70s wallpaper. It's kind of cool how this deck's been put together. This is another deck that I really love and use quite a bit. It's the Fantastical Tower by Nathalie Hertz. This is the backing. She's done another like fairy tarot of some kind, but that one's a little bit brighter and it feels a bit more childish from what I've seen online. I love this deck. It's my kind of creepy without being too scary. It's beautiful. It's very dark, but the colours that I use are still very, very rich. And with this kind of golden border, I don't know, it just really works. And the kind of just all the characters just look a little bit alien. Even the horse, like it just, I don't know. The readings that I've done with this deck have all been really intuitive, but it's really expressive. Look at this deck, this card. This is a little bit unsettling. The Hanged Man. So yeah, it's just a little bit creepy, a little bit weird, but it's not themed enough that it's unusable. In fact, I think it's a great reader. I've really enjoyed working with this one. I think I'll only use it more in the future. I love this Wheel of Fortune. Isn't that beautiful with the seasons? This is the Merry Day Tarot. Now this one is a deck that I've had for a while, like quite a while. But I've not really used it that much. And I'm not sure why that is, because I absolutely adore the artwork. But equally, it's not a deck that I ever feel like I can let go of. You know, every time I kind of do a clear out of my bookshelves, I do the same with my tarot decks. And I kind of go through the decks that I haven't used. And I think about whether I should be moving them on. And every time I pull this one out of the shelf and think, I haven't used you, but there's no way I can give you up. So I'm not sure what it is with me in this deck. If it's just that I'm not ready for it, or if it has a specific purpose. But I do think it's beautiful. The suits are interesting in that they represent a different culture in each of the suits. And then there are also like dragons of each of the suits. It's quite different. This is a fun little deck. I've totally forgotten the name. I think it's I don't know why I've just forgotten. Famira. I'm sorry, I'll leave that below. This is a backing. It's like a mini deck, like it's tiny. And it's kind of like plastic cards. I actually didn't realize that it was a mini deck when I traded for it, and it arrived and I was just like, what? But I've actually fallen in love with the fact that it's little. This is the deck that I use to kind of plan out spreads, just because the cards are little and I can move the cards around easily. But then it is also a deck that I read with, especially for those larger spreads. I think it's really handy. I've used this deck in larger spreads for others. One, because it's super traditional, super easy to work with, but then also because it is smaller, I can take photos of it easier, like the whole spread. I love this deck. It is one that I use fairly regularly. I really love how the artwork's been done. And I love that it's fairly traditional, but it still has its own style. Such a sweet, fun little deck. And it gives really good readings. Next is a very special deck indeed. It is Tarot of the Crone. I got this in a trade this year. And it's just gorgeous. I'm a little bit upset because I am supposed to have the Dark Goddess Tarot. I did a trade for it about 2 or 3 months ago. And I sent off my Nigel Jackson. But I never received my Dark Goddess. So I am a little bit upset. But I keep reminding myself that if I had to have one of them, the Dark Goddess or the Tarot of the Crone, I think it would be this one. I mean, obviously I do really wish I had the Dark Goddess because it's gorgeous and it looks amazing. But I do think that there's something really special about this deck. And I'm just so grateful to have it in my life. It is so powerful. It's almost scary how powerful this deck is sometimes. I tried using it for a daily draw and I just ended up getting all majors. Like, it's a really intense deck and it expects a lot of you, but it's willing to give a lot in return. It's amazing. Really, truly, just incredible deck. The Royal Fez Moroccan. I adore this deck. This was one of the decks that were like right at the top of my dream wish list that I just never thought I would get. And then right at the beginning of the year, it came up. Someone offered it to me for a really, really great price, and so I bought it with my Christmas money. And it's probably my favorite Rider-Waite clone because it's so Rider-Waite and yet it's just totally its own art style. I just adore it. I love this really selective use of color. I love the feel of it. It's a really sassy, talkative deck. It makes me laugh. It does not take itself too seriously, or you too seriously. I just love it. I think it's such a fabulous deck, and it's so fun. There is like a rarer, more expensive version that was released in the 50s as like a limited edition. I don't have that fancy one. I just have the one from the 70s, and mine doesn't have a box or anything, but I couldn't care less because I'm just so glad to have it in my life. I love using this deck. It's so fun. It's just got a great, really interesting, quirky personality. So fabulous. This is the Liminal Tarot, which is an absolutely stunning deck. I purchased it directly from the creator prior to it becoming out of print. I'd known for a long time that I wanted this deck, so I just made sure that I got it before it went out of print, because I know she has a couple of other decks that were both limited edition and they go for a lot of money. So I knew there was a good chance if I missed it while it was still available, I probably wouldn't get it. And I'm so, so glad that I did, because it is one of my favorite decks. It's just beautiful. Just absolutely adore the way that she's chosen to depict all of her images and the art style she's used and the colours. Just really transports me. These are cards that I love to spend time with, either in the reading, just kind of stepping into and looking at, but then also just when I'm not reading. These are the sort of cards that I just want to look at. I love this depiction of the Six of Discs. Most of the cards in this deck are pretty traditional, but then there's just a few like this that are just so different, but yet still portray the same sort of message. I just love it. This is the Gill Tarot. I won't show too much of this because I always talk about this deck. This is my favourite deck ever. I knew before I even owned it, long before I owned it, that this deck would be special to me. And it is. It is truly, I don't know. I feel like soul deck is so cliche and a lot of people just think that that is such a silly term, but I just don't know how else to describe this deck for me. I mean, I just knew that I had a perfect connection with it before I even held it in my hands. And then when I did hold it in my hands, it was a physical, emotional, whole body reaction. My body and my intuition just respond to these cards, and I feel like they respond to me, which is a really unique and powerful experience. This is the Jungian Tarot by Robert Wang, and he has a whole host of books that kind of complement this deck. One of the things I don't love about this deck is that they're not really numbered, but this is a deck that I work through as a study deck. I feel like working through his books and looking at these images, I've only really worked through the majors so far, but I feel like they've already taught me so much about the archetypes held within these cards. It's a really interesting deck. Everything has been chosen very purposefully. And I actually don't mind this artwork either. The pips are very much pips, but from what I understand, everything in these are very purposefully done as well. So this is an ongoing study project for me, and I've not really made my way through the minors yet, but it is a really interesting endeavour. The Fantastic Menagerie is my only Bubba Studios deck at the moment, and it is one of my favourite decks. I adore this deck. Here's the backing. It's based on the artwork by J.J. Granville, and this deck has a very strong personality, a lot of black humour. It's kind of a bit dark, a little bit unsettling, but very funny as well. It's a wonderful deck to read with. I use this deck a lot, just because its readings are really clear, but also because they give really interesting readings, and because I think the artwork is really fun too. It's such a great little deck, and really interesting. Really interesting. Some of the depictions of the cards, they're not traditionally depicted, but they are traditional in their meaning for the most part. But some of the cards really kind of get you thinking about your morals. Like, it's a pretty full-on deck sometimes. Some of the cards are really pretty questionable. But I think that's what makes this deck so rich and so interesting to work with, because it is really unique in a lot of ways. This is the Hoi Polloi Tarot. It is a recolouring from the 70s of the Rider-Waite, and I love it. It's kind of really ugly, but really awesome at the same time. And it is a lot of fun to read with. This deck makes me laugh out loud. I think I posted my original deck interview with this deck on Instagram, and it did. It had me in stitches. This deck was so talkative, so sharp, really quite blunt, but in just a hilarious way. It was totally sassy. And for those of you who don't really personify your decks, you probably think I sound silly, but it's just how it felt reading this deck. It shouted at me these one-liners that were just hilarious. So I don't know what it is about the colouring or how this deck's been put together, but I just adore it. It is so much fun, and it's just like, I really don't need this deck. I mean, I have lots of Rider-Waite decks, but for some reason this colouring just adds a whole new voice to the deck. It just completely changes it, and it's so fun. Just love it. Look at this magician. He looks kind of ridiculous but totally amazing. That's kind of how I feel about this deck. Ridiculous and amazing. And last but not least, this is the New Wave Tarot by Amanda Lee Stillwell. This was given to me, Blair bought it for me for my birthday a couple of years ago. Because New Wave, post-punk, that late 70s, early 80s music is my favourite era. Got a bit of Gary Newman, like it's just... Robert Smith from The Cure and his wife Mary as the lovers. It's just a really fun deck. I think it's my only like true novelty deck, and I don't really use it, but I do really love it. Swords are microphones, the discs are records, the cups are teacups, guys, and the wands are eyeliner pencils. Like, it's ridiculous. Oh, we have Bowie. It's ridiculous but amazing. So those are my out of print tarot decks that I own currently. I really hope you enjoyed this video. As mentioned, I'll leave links to all the relevant videos in the description box below. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave those below and I'll do my best to get back to you. And until next time guys, so much love. Bye.